Hello, Maigen Thomas. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm thrilled and honored you're here, and I'm so excited for our conversation today. So, I mentioned that your background, I could go on and on and on about your background and experience, but what I like to do for the guests is let you tell your story.
Yeah, I'd love to share that because especially when we talked earlier and we talked about the different kind of questions we wanted to get into during our conversation, the background really does matter. And I will keep it brief. My life really began when I got kicked out of Canada. Back in the early days of the internet, we did not have dating. We were just talking, and there were people who were funny and interesting. And one of them ended up being somebody that I kind of fell in like with. And then I flew from Charlotte, North Carolina to Victoria, BC. So we landed in Vancouver, but I stayed in Victoria for a little bit. I did end up getting kicked out because it turns out you should, in fact, pay taxes and fill out paperwork. And after 3 years, they were very polite when they asked me to please leave. And I said, but my cat's here and all my stuff. And they're like, you should have thought of that before you moved here illegally. And it was pretty devastating. I'm not going to lie. So I sat in the airport at Seattle for about 12 hours because my first flight was oversold. And they were like, does anybody want to hang out here and get some free flight credits? And I'm like, I literally have nothing to do since I just got kicked out of a country. And that is how I found my next job. It was on monster.com. If you remember the olden days of 2008 is when it was. And Delta was hiring. So I became a flight attendant in 2008. And it was awesome. Even though I love what I'm doing now, for those brief years in my late 20s, I was like, literally, the world is my oyster. And I had a really wonderful time. And right around year 5.5, I realized I had transitioned to a new base. Some of the what we would call senior mamas were not particularly nice in this base. And I realized, I'm like, you know what? I think I might want to do something else. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but my grandmother had passed and left all of the grandkids $10,000 each. And this is the first time in my life I'd ever had money to make a decision with, something that I could do with it. So I grew up pretty poor. I didn't know it at the time, but later in my adult life, I'm like, oh, is that why we had those situations? Great. I knew I wanted to do something to do with education. I did not have a 4-year degree. I have tried that 3 or 4 times. It just does not take. It is not my style of learning and engagement. My partner at the time was a network engineer, and this is kind of real nerd stuff, connecting wires and making things talk to each other. Tech boot camps were really big. And this was in 2013 when this all kind of went down. So I ended up going to a full stack boot camp here in Portland, Oregon. I did not actually quit my flight attendant job until the day before the boot camp started because I was too chicken to actually feel like I was going to fully commit.
Doesn't sound like you're a chicken at all, Maigen. The word that was coming to mind as you're sharing is bravery and taking action and taking leaps. Just was going to say, I don't see any element of being a chicken.
In the moment, though, I think everybody who might be listening has had that moment where you're like, later you realize that was a brave inflection point. But in the moment, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just going to grab my butt with both hands and jump and just see what happens. And I did. And I got to be honest, 2 weeks in, I was sitting on the floor crying because JavaScript was really hard. Turns out, I found out later, everybody cried, but everybody else went to the bathroom and like hid it. But luckily, I had kind people who were willing to sit and say, all right, let me stay late with you and see if we can work out what your code broke. And we did, and I recovered. And from then on, it was kind of like a snowball rolling downhill, just gathering and gathering and going, okay, I think I got this. I think I can figure this out. And career day came, and people were maybe these days, maybe not what you would picture, but back then, I'm trying to think of the graceful way to be kind, but also give you a real sense of what was happening. There were some guys who were young and slept on the couches at the boot camp and maybe kind of smelled like they slept on the couches. So like I was competing against them for jobs. Meanwhile, I have presence as a flight attendant. I showed up with, a nice business dress and heels, and I'm shaking hands and making full eye contact. I stood out a lot, and I caught the eye of a recruiter who's like, hey, I work at this capital equity firm and we're looking for a UX designer. And I was like, ew, banking. But I'm glad I took a chance on it because it actually turned out to be a really well-funded startup that was owned by a capital equity firm. It was very scrappy, we figure out how to make this work. I had two senior designers over me, one of which has been my mentor for my entire career. That's how I found myself into my first job in tech. I started as a front-end developer and I learned what I do now, essentially on the job. I just grew in this. And suddenly I look around and it's July 15th, 2025. And I've been in this career almost 12 years. And that's bonkers to me.
Absolutely. There's so much I want to talk to you about. I was also feverishly taking notes because there's so many things you just touched upon in your story that really struck me and related to my story that I wanted to talk about. But first, what I was really excited to delve into, you are an expert in website accessibility. You also focus highly on inclusive design. We'll delve into that, Maigen. Part of the story I'd like to talk about in this messy world right now with AI being the topic of the year, I've been feeling a sense of less focus on humanity and the people and the connection and the community. And it really strikes me that at this age, you are focusing on the human element, the accessibility, making sure products are inclusive. And I would like to talk about in this moment in time how you got there. But before we do, one thing that came up is you were speaking about taking these leaps that were possibly the best leaps ever for you, that you were in tears. And as you were saying that, I recall one of the inflection points I had. One of the biggest leaps I took in my career was going from a big company like Fidelity Investments early in my career to a company of 8 where I'd be asked to do everything in the UX world. And I remember being excited, but I remember then calling my mom and dad and sobbing uncontrollably because excitement and fear and anxiety are wrapped up together. And I was hoping to hear a little bit from you. What do you tell people? Like, being in tears on the floor doesn't necessarily mean this is a bad thing, right?
No. So it's very funny. I think as someone who has never had a child, but I can only tell you the stories that other people have told me, is the pain of childbirth completely goes away after, I mean, for some people, they say, you know, basically once they set eyes on their child. And for some people, it just fades over time until they get pregnant again. And they're like, oh, wait, I got to go through that. So what I recognize now is in the moment, it was incredibly painful and it did not feel like a moment of growth. It felt like a moment of terror. And am I going to survive this? I mean, I knew physically I was probably going to be fine. Like I wasn't being dangled over a cliff with a fire underneath me, but it did feel like the world kind of pulled the rug out from under me a few times. But we have to remember that we're each on our own hero's journey. There's always going to be the rising action, and there's always going to be the climax and the falling and the resolution. And it doesn't mean that that's the only hero's journey we will ever experience in our lives. So if there's anything that I could whisper through the ages to my younger self, it would be like, everything's going to be okay. The universe is working in your favor. Even when you feel like you can't see what that positive ending looks like, the universe has got your back and it's going to turn out to be really awesome. If you can unclench, drop your shoulders away from your ears and go, okay, I trust myself to make good decisions that will put me in a position of success.
I appreciate you saying that, Maigen, in terms of the universe has our back and has your back. You've mentioned that you'd share this with your younger self. It's messy in the world right now, and that's an understatement. It's messy in many, many different ways. In our lens of the tech community, product management, UX, layoffs, struggles, AI. Are you telling others and giving others that advice right now? Because I do have to say, when I'm talking with UXers, product management leaders, when they're seeing the layoffs, not knowing what's next, sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And is this still your mindset when you're working with UXers? It's going to be okay?
Yes, it is still my mindset. I've told other folks, like, I'm very much building the law of attraction into my life. I've been literally practicing the practices, walking the walk for a couple of years now. And sometimes it's hard to trust because when you haven't figured out what that relationship is between you and the universe, and understanding that the universe is kind of an entity, you feel like you're in this alone, but you're not. You actually have everything that you need in order to be successful. We have a tendency to hold on to what we think that success is going to look like. We think out of all the 10,000 possible outcomes, that's the one that we want. That didn't bring me as much money as I thought it would bring me. It doesn't, in the long term, it all is going to work out in your favor.
Yeah.
And there were definitely moments in the interim that were not awesome. I've had some truly dramatic experiences. I have been gloriously fired at least twice in my tech career alone. And it is humbling because you feel like you're small and insignificant in that moment. But really and truly, like, if I could tell anyone anything that they could actually understand, and this is the hardest part, because we're all so busy like living in our world as opposed to understanding that we are our world. We're going to get really woo for a second here, but you are the only person in your existence.
Mm-hmm.
You're the only person that's actually making choices and getting reflections back from the universe. Everyone else is in their own little bubble. We just happen to be brushing up against other people's bubbles. So if you believe that you're not the main character in your own life story, then you're not going to experience main character life. And I don't mean that in like the living on YouTube kind of main character energy, but it's trusting that you know what you need to know and that you know how to access the information that you need to move forward.
I love the way you're framing this, Maigen, in terms of we are the heroes, we're the main characters, and it's our story. I speak with a lot of women who know what they want to do or have some uncertainty, but have some ideas for pilots of next steps. And one of the barriers is taking action. I've been helping them figure out different ways, like start small, play a different character for an hour or two.
Nothing you do is wrong.
Yeah.
You just need to do something, because I've never seen a movie in my life where the main character does nothing and everything happens at them. You've never seen that, because that's not a story that exists. Mm-hmm. So basically, the only thing you can do wrong is freezing and taking no action, because even the smallest action, even if it's just you're talking to folks who are in their career and they're like, do I look for a job at a bigger company? Do I look at a smaller company? Do I want more work-life balance? Do I start my own kind of thing? It's what's the next step? What does your intuition tell you? And if your intuition says, go talk to that person next to you at Starbucks and just be like, hey, what's up? That's the next step that you were meant to take, even if that doesn't turn out to be Jeff Bezos ready to hand you $10 million as your next job. But it's that openness to say, I'm willing to take a chance. And even if it's not that conversation that turns into something, you've set in motion the momentum that allows that next person to come into your life that is going to be the one that changes it, or the next, or the next.
Yep. I find your story fascinating. You spoke a little bit to your journey going from being a flight attendant to taking tech boot camps to moving into a UX design role. Can you share with me, Maigen, a little bit about I'm curious if you think of it as an inflection point, your focus and specialization on accessibility and inclusivity. Was there a moment in time when you moved more from the generalist role to focusing in this area? And if so, what led to that pivot?
It was a shift, and it took time. There wasn't any one situation where I was like, accessibility. There was a number of small things that added up and made me go, honestly, it's so obvious. It's smacking me in the face. One is experiences that I had growing up and through non-tech roles, including being a flight attendant, where I was exposed to people with disabilities in a way that I don't think most people do. And I think that ties into why I'm so passionate now, because the problem I see with most folks is that they have never had a meaningful relationship, not just a, hey, Bob, but like a meaningful relationship. I talk to you as a human. I get to know you on a deeper level with a person with disabilities. And I'm not just talking, and this is not to demean or say that any one disability is more important or more impactful than another, but like I'm on the autism spectrum, I have ADHD, and I have auditory processing disorder. And all of those combined are kind of like a neurological and hearing thing. Only in the last few years have understood that like I'm not just, a special snowflake. I have disabilities. I am a person with disabilities. But I also have never spent a lot of time in my life, or I haven't talked to a lot of people who have experienced folks who have had siblings or parents or whoever with cerebral palsy, or have spent long periods of time in a wheelchair, or are completely bedridden kind of thing. I grew up and I got into a little trouble when I was 15. I'm grateful that I grew up in a time where social media was not a thing. Yeah, there's still a few things where I'm like, ooh, I'm glad nobody found out about that. But like one thing ended up having me do some community service. And I worked in I would love to say it's a retirement home, but a retirement home is a really nice way to say, this is where we stick old people when we don't know what to do with them. No, I worked in a place where most people were a term that the nurse used at the time, catatonic. Yeah. They basically are in their wheelchair and they get moved into the living room and they all watch TV and they eat whatever is provided for them and they just don't engage with life. And like, if that's retirement, I don't want to be retired. But I also had a lot of compassion because they seemed to like brighten up when I came in the room. I have always had this energy of like, it's fun because I grew up with my grandparents. I don't see old as being anything bad. I'm just like, they're just people and they just happen to be older than me. So I grew up with my grandparents and I saw these folks in the retirement home. And then my granddad, the family always said he lost his leg. He didn't lose it in a war or anything. He smoked and drank and ended up with blood clots and a few other situations and ended up having surgery. They removed his leg above the knee. And at the same time, he had vision-related disabilities. He had macular degeneration. I think he went and had a surgery that did not go well. And he ended up with special technology that apparently from the state did not understand what that meant, but they gave him this kind of device where he could run a mouse-like thing over a newspaper and it would project it on the screen. And I mean, so big, it was like one word for an entire screen. And that's how he would read the newspaper. So he was very, very smart, always reading, regardless of his level of disability. And I was just like, great, we find tools when we can't access what we need. So none of that came to me as this is a disability. Then as a flight attendant, I experienced what I see a lot of stories about right now, which is unfortunately airlines damage the necessary mobility equipment of people in wheelchairs. And it's a problem that does need to be solved. But I witnessed and stayed with, because it was legally required, that at least one flight attendant was on board the aircraft. Even if the others needed to go and transition to the next flight, someone needed to stay until every passenger is off of the aircraft. So I've seen folks who have like a wheelchair, just didn't come pick them up. So I stayed with them until the next flight crew came. It really gave me a sense of, wow, you really do feel left behind when you're a person with a disability, specifically a mobility disability, especially when it comes to air travel. And I'm imagining lots of other travel as well. So all of that started compounding in my brain and like recognizing that there are people with other lived experiences. And then a couple of years ago, I saw the documentary Crip Camp. I initially put this on thinking, I'm a UX designer. I should know about this stuff. And someone recommended this to me and I expected to have it on in the background while I scrolled on my phone like you do. Mm-hmm. And I ended up setting down my phone and being so mesmerized by this story of people fighting for their rights. But it started with kids at like a special needs summer camp. And they called themselves Crip Camp. And this is in like 1972, helped each other and helped themselves do activities that I promise you 90% of the people I've ever talked to would be like, I didn't know they could do that. And it's because why should they be left out? They just need a little extra time to get up at bat. And maybe they need a couple extra people to act as their legs to get them to first base, but they can still participate in the activities of life and they deserve to. When I was teaching the UC Berkeley XUI boot camp, I was recruited to teach that in 2020. And I taught 3 cohorts. And what I also recognized was that I had a lot of international students for whom English was not their first language. I don't speak other languages. I kind of speak really bad French. I can sort of get by in Spanish. But these folks were still dedicated And this is not to equate not speaking a language as a
Mm-hmm.
disability, but think about the access to information. And they have spent the same money as anyone else to be in that class. Providing information in a way you could understand it is the same thing as providing access to an experience for someone who cannot physically do the same thing as I can. So all of these together made me realize like accessibility isn't just, hey, is there an elevator, an escalator? It's not just making sure people in wheelchairs or walkers have access. It's making sure that we have information that is available to everyone in an equitable way. I mentioned that I'm on the autism spectrum and I've been reading more about it. I was diagnosed in my late 30s, and that was interesting for me to learn about and to understand that this isn't just like my secret superpower. I can find anything where other people left it, but that it is just a different perspective in the way I process information. I understand now that people on the autism spectrum have a tendency to be more focused on justice and equity, and everybody should have the same access. So my superpower got activated by all of this knowledge and experience. And I recognize that it's just logical.
Yeah.
It only really came to the most helpful piece of information a few weeks ago when I went to a Forrester. So Forrester is one of those big research companies. People pay thousands of dollars to understand what Forrester has figured out, looking at bigger populations, countries, businesses, industries, etc., economies. They pointed out that right now we are in a very interesting time. 730 million older adults, aging adults, are all aging at the same time. And something I've been talking about is 11,000 people a day turn 65 in just our country. That is the whole post-World War II baby boomer generation. They are aging rapidly, but it is incremental change that increases your disability. We have cognitive issues. I'm wearing my assistive technology right now in these glasses. Just because it's normalized doesn't make it less of a disability. So I take kind of this huge, big, wide sample and go, the only logical next step is to bring accessibility to the focus of my career, because I think it's going to matter over time more and more. And I also really want to continue to be an early adopter of technology, even into my aging years. I don't know what retirement looks like, because I'm like, well, I'm not just going to sit around and watch TV. I'm probably going to mentor. I'm probably going to run a couple of businesses. Like, I love engaging with people. And if I can make their lives better, not just by bringing them a Coke and a smile on the plane, but actually empowering them to do more, to experience the fullness of life.
Your story, my brain just lights up. There's so many things you just spoke to that I wanted to ask you about. The first was, as you were talking organically about the life experiences you've had, through those life experiences, seeing your zone of genius and superpowers, it sounds like you're doing something organically and naturally that, as I work with women who are trying to figure things out, sometimes they're needing more structure to get there. But what I heard from you, and this is something I see for anyone trying to figure out what's next, the more that you align your work with what matters to you, with your life experience, with your values, and with your superpowers, as you described it, or zone of genius, when that starts coming together, what I keep seeing from women is that when they think through their careers and think about what worked or what didn't and what their life experiences were, it's sort of like a puzzle that snaps into place, that when you bring values, superpowers, life experiences together, it snaps into place where you know what you want to do next. And I was wondering, were you thinking, it sounds like this happened organically for you versus, oh, I'm going to go through a skills and experience assessment, for example?
Oh, it's 100% organic. It absolutely is, including founding my business was organic. And I think I have fought against it for a while. There's a lot of shoulding all over ourselves, which is, I should do this. I should do that. I should do this because kids, and because husband, or because partner, or because parents, or whatever. And we're letting all of these other things inform what we think we should be. And that, I think, causes the cognitive dissonance of us being like, I should do this, but my heart's being drawn over here. And now we're feeling divided. But
Yeah.
if you just focus on you and your life experience and your zone of genius and your area of interest, it won't feel like it's a struggle because you're in where you're meant to be.
Let's talk about, you did start your own business,
I did.
Level 11
Yes.
Technology. And when did you found the business? How long ago was it now?
It was April of last year. I officially registered it in June of 2023, but I didn't start working on it until a middle-aged white man in middle America told me I wasn't cut out for middle management. I think that's a sign from the universe.
That's something as well. Back to the universe has your back. Sometimes just messages come from an experience, or a person or people where you just know this is a
Yep.
sign.
I got that sign. I was at a company that I really loved working for. They're a great company. I enjoyed what we were doing. They laid off my boss. And then a few months later, they gave me an offer. In retrospect, as a business owner, in the laws that we have as the US and employment law, I think they just felt required to give some kind of justification for asking me to seek success elsewhere. They were like, we can do a performance improvement plan or offer you a severance. And I'm just like, I don't know about anyone else, but like, if this is the first time someone's told you a performance improvement plan is not to improve your performance. So if you get that offer, start looking. It's not a subtle, like, we think you can improve. And what I now understand is it really wasn't performance based. It was, they needed some reason so that I didn't sue the company because, again, we live in the US. It's a very litigious company or country. But they needed to free up that salary so that they could hire more engineers in order to get ahead of this AI situation. And like, as a business owner now, I feel no hard feelings about that because I've, again, been in my law of attraction practices and I knew this was a clear invitation from the universe. It was like, do you want a severance? The universe said, do you want some money to start your business?
Yeah.
Take the money.
Yes, take the money. Going back to career inflection points and
Yeah.
being ready to take the leap, there's a couple of times you've mentioned having a bit of a financial safety net can help with that leap. You mentioned when your
Yes.
grandmother gifted
Yep.
you $10,000 and you
That's what I
figured
spent
out
it
how
on the
to
boot
take it.
camp.
How important is it to have the financial safety net to make a leap from your perspective?
That is a really good question. I can say from the perspective I've had in the past, I grew up poor and I was not financially literate. I am only becoming more financially literate because I have a partner who knows stuff like that and helps me understand immediate trade-off versus long-term compound interest. Did not understand how that is so powerful. Albert Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. Now I understand, but every time I saved up enough in my 401k, some kind of emergency or health situation would come up and I'd have to clear it out. And I didn't understand like how that would be such a detriment in the future because you're literally just cutting your legs out from under yourself as you get this long-term nest egg built. So yes, the financial part, it was a sense of security, but it was also, it was a good trigger for me in how I grew up and my relationship to money. I think everyone's trigger is going to be different. And I also have to soothe that idea of like, ooh, I have no money. Money is fungible. Money is a renewable resource for us individually. Time and effort are things that are not renewable resources. Time is not a renewable resource. So if it feels like I don't have quite enough, maybe that decision and opportunity is not available to me. I would rather you focus on that time that you have that decision available to you or whatever that next focus is.
Yeah. So you started your business pretty recently in the last year or so. The tech industry is just so much uncertainty, so much happening. With AI here, it's shifting things. And I wonder, how are things going for you? So let's talk about Level 11. I've thought about the work you've been doing to bring accessibility to all of the work you're doing, specifically mission driven companies. You also have an apprenticeship model. Can you describe a little bit about what you are building and how it's been going, both what's been working and any challenges you've had? I'm sure there's been no
Oof.
challenges.
I appreciate, yeah, no challenges whatsoever. In fact, I will be very, very honest because I think the folks who are listening deserve this. currently feel like I am failing it a little bit. Let me share a little bit about this. My intention in building level 11 technology was to build an opportunity for people who I was seeing were becoming more and more marginalized. So teaching the boot camp, I had 3 different cohorts. It's a 6-month boot camp, and I think it cost somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 for each person. Through my experience, I saw that there were some instructors who basically they would show up, they would read off the slides, and you get what you get. And that has a direct impact on the success of all of the students in that cohort. I ended up being a mentor to other instructors because I'm like, we could do better. Yes, this curriculum is a little outdated, but we can refine it, bring our own fresh perspective to it. So before every 3.5-hour class, I would spend the night before for probably about 3 to 4 hours going through every slide, adding my notes, making sure things were up to date, making sure links worked and that they weren't out of date resources because the curriculum was not updated as frequently as we would like to think it was. I updated it with every single cohort because it really mattered to me that I showed up and I helped people succeed. And what I later realized, even though I had great NPS scores, net promoter scores from my students, that didn't translate into them having better outcomes in their career. And I think as you work with people in tech, a lot of times it's timing, a lot of times it's who you know, not what you know. Yep. A lot of times it's having the right person hand your resume to the hiring manager at the right point in the hiring process to kind of skip the line and not have to fight for notice in the ATS kind of thing. What I recognized that there were some people who just needed more support in order to feel successful, in order to show up as their best and most authentic selves. Some people, 5% of them, really had it nailed. They already had life experience and or work experience and they were fine. I found that a lot of people could get the technical skills of UX and had no idea how to work within teams. So some of the things that I started bringing into my cohorts were practicing the presentations. Presentations are really important. It makes or breaks how your executive leadership perceives you and the value of UX. So it matters. And I just think it's kind of mean to throw someone under and be like, all right, we're doing presentations and we're recording them, give it a shot, but without guiding them through their practice run and saying, okay, here's what you could do a little bit better. Here's how I think the handoff between you and you should go, some kind of feedback. And same goes for, I brought in 360-degree feedback because it's something that a lot of companies use. You will be exposed to that in the future. And you should also care about how you show up to your teammates because we've all been on a group project where that one person just doesn't do their job and everyone else does like 140% of the work to bring it across the finish line. So those folks know what it's going to be like in a future job. And then there are people who just don't really show up and don't seem to care. So it's important that people understand that there are soft skills well beyond the technology. So seeing that folks were not necessarily getting traction in their career, I started asking around to different hiring managers, including my partner, who is a tech executive and runs multiple software teams. And essentially, people are hesitant to hire juniors or people who are career changers because you just don't have a track record. They can't look back at what you've done and talk to your former employer and be like, all right, this person's going to be able to, quote unquote, hit the ground running, which is an unfair expectation of a junior to start with. So my first experience was as an intern. I was a paid intern, and I think it was like 2 months in when I realized, hey, I know I have 40 hours and I have a time card, but there's some extra stuff I'd really like to do. Am I allowed to work more hours? And my CTO at the time of this little startup basically laughed and was like, you're the cheapest labor on the team. Go nuts. And I was like, neat. So I leaned in, and I know right now there's a lot of people who are on my side of like, let's show up, let's go above and beyond. And that's just how I have always, that's how I think how I was raised. And some people are kind of in the anti-work camp because, capitalism and other things that are just trying to suck the life out of everyone in order to make money. So I am definitely in the camp of like, I leaned in. I was like, I was doing 12-hour days, but it didn't feel like a life suck. I was exhilarated. I was figuring out how to write code in a language I'd never written before that I didn't learn in the boot camp. Like I was excited about it. So all of this to say, I had experiences in my first job that are not available to many people. And I think part of it is that they don't know how to guide a junior. People get, it's, I don't even know how to describe it, but you actually need to set people up for success. People don't know how to hire and set people up for success. I have really appreciated a couple of different companies who bring you in, you're brand new, and they're like, sweet, let's talk about what MRR is, monthly recurring revenue. Setting people up for success includes teaching them what they need to know about the business so that they care enough to show up. Just expecting someone to come in and be a code monkey or move some pixels around and make pretty boxes on the screen, that's not going to help people go, what can I do to help this company succeed? They're going to do just enough to make their job feel like it's a success. I see that there's a lot of people who essentially don't get this like 1 and 2 years of guidance that I and many others got at the beginnings of our career. And that is where I think an apprenticeship agency can truly excel. We see it in the skilled trades. You have to be a journeyman and an apprentice before you're allowed to put wiring into a whole house and potentially get yourself electrocuted. And I think that is essentially what we're lacking in the tech industry, and therefore probably some of the problems with these businesses that don't know how to grow past a certain stage, or they always end up with interpersonal drama in the workplace. It's because we haven't taught people how to be good citizens, good employees, good coworkers, good teammates, and good stewards of resources that can make or break a company.
Maigen, thank you. I'd love to delve even deeper into this business model you have
Yeah.
with the apprenticeship agency. I'm wondering in this messy time, like to your point, for junior designers right now in the tech space, it's really hard. As you were touching upon, hiring managers are looking for people who already have a proven track record. They can come in day one and get the role. It sounds like for the apprentice who comes through your program, you're finding sort of paid internships for their first year of experience. Is that how it works? And if so, are there companies willing to take a bet right now on these junior employees, even for a first year internship program? I'm just getting the sense from the abyss of tech that tech is only caring about the revenue and the top line and bottom line numbers, not caring as much as
About
giving
humans?
the humans. Yes. I'm curious, what is your
Yeah.
assessment of the landscape?
Your assessment of the landscape is pretty spot on right now. I feel like tech companies, especially the ones that we're thinking of when we talk about tech companies, because I think there's a distinction between SaaS products,
Yeah.
product companies, and then companies that also have tech. So we're talking about what you think of typical startups, Silicon Valley, Meta, Facebook, Fang, etc. I think those companies are not hiring juniors right now, and I don't know when they will start again. I think two things have shifted. One is that the Section 174, the law that was passed in 2017 that went into effect in 2022, that impacted how companies can amortize their R&D department. And as UX designers, we are R&D. We're research and development. Design fits in there between research and development, but like R&D, that's us. And that's part of what caused the major layoffs starting in 21, 22, 23. And we kind of saw a little bit of a resurgence, but AI came along immediately and kind of kiboshed that. And so now all these CEOs, how do we get rid of humans and replace them with AI? And I think some of them are starting to realize, hey, maybe that's not our best idea. I think we've got a couple more years to play out on that. Now, I want to go back up a little bit and be like, we are still very aspirational at level 11 technology, because I made a kind of a huge business screw up in the sense that I tried to run forward before I walked. And I was like, okay, I'm going to hire some apprentices and the money will come. And yes, I still believe in the law of attraction, but I also was trying to build a business with a book of business to start with. And doing both of those was not trying to kill me, but like it was really like the levels of anxiety and stress and crying every night it was too much. So I actively made the decision a few months ago to say, I need to not focus on the apprenticeship part until I have not only a book of business, I'm working on that right now. I've got 4 clients and they're all a little different. So I thought I'd be able to do something a little more standardized and therefore like create processes for apprentices. I'm recognizing that that is not true. All these companies are kind of unique snowflakes, and they're finances are not all in the same place. So I'm building it, I'm working on it. It's there, but I only have essentially 2 apprentices. And right now they are unpaid apprentices. And that crushes my soul more than anything, because on my website, my page of like, here's the plan for level 11 technology, I'm building it in public. My goal is to get more money in the hands of Black and brown people, women, LGBTQ folks, the neurodivergent, and disabled. I can't do that by not paying apprentices. So I had to really take a step back and be like, my desire, my heart is here to help support you and help you grow. But in doing that and building a business, it was basically like I'm doing 2 full-time jobs at once.
I've heard this from other women entrepreneurs and business owners. There's such a desire to lift others up and provide opportunities to others. But oftentimes that desire is coming up before they put on their own oxygen mask, falling
Yes.
into that as
Put your
well.
own
But
oxygen mask
yes,
on. I have to keep
that
learning
too.
that.
I've been guilty of that as well, where we discuss having a community and collective and lifting each other up. But until we're in a position where we have the revenue to pay, we do want to help others, but let's get our business book in shape first. Good.
Yes. That is the most humbling experience I've had this year, though, is having to recognize that I'm not prepared for this, even though I really, really want to be, and I can really try and force it. But we know when we force it, that's not, it doesn't happen naturally, and it doesn't quite work as if it would be born organically. So I anticipate next year, it won't be like the cohort of 6 or 8 that I was imagining. It's going to be more like 2 and maybe 4 by the end of the year. And that's not what I had envisioned for the growth of this company. But I also know that if I take this time, I get these processes down and I understand like how to guide them, I'm actually going to get better work out of them, because I'm going to be able to set expectations more clearly and not just, I don't know, we'll figure it out as we go. And then everything is flying by the seat of your pants.
You made a distinction when we were talking about tech companies that I think is really, really important in terms of where we are with the FANG companies and the Silicon Valley tech companies versus the companies that have integrated tech into their business and mission.
Yes.
And as you've been bringing accessibility, as you mentioned, this is your career and it's your calling, bringing accessibility to
Yes.
the focus of your career. How have you, in building your business, how have you found the appropriate clients? I suspect it's not Facebook right now or the FANG companies. Is it mission driven organizations doing social good, or who are your primary clients right now who are really focused on the humans and the accessibility piece?
Yeah. Well, I will say that the companies that I'm finding are not necessarily the ones that are tapped into needing accessibility. They believe it when I let them know, like, hey,
Yeah.
you've got customers, or you've got 2 of my clients are nonprofits. So they know that they are a public facing company, that they're becoming aware that their website is considered a place of public access, and they don't want to exclude people. They just don't know what they don't know. This is why I wrote that book, Practical UX. All of these folks who are trying to get into the tech industry, I'm like, stop focusing on FANG. I know that the reason we focus on them is because they pay higher than average industry salaries, and we all want benefits. I believe the world is going to be a better place when we unhook health insurance and other benefits from our employment. Our country is going to be in a better place. We're going to stop valuing humans based on their productivity and understand that like we all have a base level of needs, regardless of what our disabilities or lack of disabilities are.
This is the first time we've had a chance to talk about practical UX and what your intention was behind the book. And you're speaking to it a little bit, but for the UXers that are trying to figure out what's next, how can your work and book inform what they're thinking? I'm talking to UXers that are just, I don't know, is
Yeah.
UX the way to
Yeah.
go, or is it time to shift?
We focus on these large tech companies because A, they're extremely visible. They're in our day-to-day life. There's tons of people with the ex Amazon, whatever, on their LinkedIn profile. And we think that's the pinnacle of experience in tech. I want to go work there. And it's not the Emerald City. It is not, it is a facade of excitement. I know folks who were at I don't want to say what company, but it was a big tech company, more so probably 5, 6 years ago. And they worked on a drop down for 6 months, a single drop down. How is that impact? Are you making an impact on people, or are you making an impact on whether or not that company can make just 15 more cents on the dollar or something? So practical UX is, I hope, a beacon of hope for folks who are moving into this industry. And I want you to stop looking at that level of company. First of all, you don't want to work there. They're not here for your mental health. They are here for the bottom line. They churn through employees like nobody's business. And there's a lot of internal politics. Like, that's not a safe space for you to learn how to be a really awesome UXer. Where it would really behoove you to go is a smaller company that happens to have a technical presence, and a lot of them are websites, but they have technical things, but they don't consider themselves a tech company. Like, I used to work for a company that was an insurance agency management software. Nothing sexy about that. They help insurance agencies manage all their clients and their houses and the boats and the trucks and all of this other stuff, but they didn't consider themselves a tech company. I helped them move from a legacy remote desktop platform thing that was installed on a server in a closet that they would all access in the office, to moving their product into the cloud. And like, that's real world impact for all of their customers. Does it matter to that your neighbor knows who it is that you work for? No. They were an amazing company. They were family owned. They treated people really well. Like, I started there my first day, and you probably can't see it, but there's a little wooden sign over here with my name carved into it. And like, the grandpa that started the company carved it with his woodworking machine so that I had like my name on my desk when I got there. And that company needs just as much UX, if not more, of like the work you do can impact people versus going to be just another cog in the wheel at a 60,000 person company that you're like on a performance improvement plan if you, I don't know, don't show up for a meeting or something.
It's something that's on my mind a lot as I talk with people in tech, whether they've worked at the FANGs or, as you said, like more mission driven companies or smaller shops, what their definition of abundance is. Because when I talk with my friends who came from FANG companies, they were miserable in many cases, but they came out of that experience, and you touched upon this, it pays well. So they came out of the experience with financial abundance and financial stability. But there's
Yes.
so many, you're speaking to abundance around having real world impact, finding fulfilling work, healthy mental health.
Yes. Healthy boundaries between you and work.
And that's what I want to ask you. What does abundance mean to you? And what should we, I know it's, people have different definitions, but what does it
Totally.
mean to you?
Abundance really does mean being able to make the positive impact on the world that I know I was put on this planet to bring. I didn't ever know what exactly it was. And now I actually feel like I'm grateful to, in 5 days, I turned 44. I am grateful to have figured this out before I'm 70, 80, 90 years old and looking
I've
back.
only
Thank
started
you.
figuring it out at 50.
I now know I'm here to make a difference. I really want to help people, including my future self, have equitable access to all of the goods and services and experiences that I want to have. And I think everyone else deserves to come along with me. I think there is an abundance mindset that does come with not being so focused on financial gain. And I know the money's coming. I know right now is just a period of time where I'm figuring things out. But what I do is valuable. What I do empowers businesses to make more money, and it empowers people to have a better lived experience.
Yeah.
I'm also blessed in the sense that I have the ability to build this while also making sure that my bills are paid, because I have a partner who is 100% in this with me, but is gainfully employed by one of those large companies. He's also got like over a decade more experience than me. So like, yay. But that is not necessarily what everyone has in this life experience. So I encourage them to focus on, what does abundance look like in your life? Is it having time to spend with friends and build relationships that really fulfill you? Is it having enough money to give to the organizations that you see making an impact? Is it having enough time abundance to show up for the protest, or drop what you're doing and go support your aging parents by installing handrails or floors or replacing mirrors and locks? Like, what does that look like for you? Because that's what feels good to me, knowing that I can take care of my family and that I can be there for the friends that I care about and do work that I know is powerful, even though the work I do is not sexy. I think a lot of people have an idea of like, I'm going to do cool stuff, changing lines of CSS. I'm not doing rocket science.
Yeah.
I used to have aspirations of being like, I'm going to get like a Nobel Peace Prize or I don't know, science, something like that. No, I'm doing the small day-to-day things that make people have a better life. And that is what feels the best to me. And it's different than what I thought it would be a year ago, 5 years ago, and 10 years ago.
And this is an unfair question, too. And I'll ask it anyway with that preface. It's an unpredictable time. You said you may not know exactly where the dotted lines will connect, but the universe has your back. Where do you envision yourself in 2 to 3 years? What will you be doing? And back to, you are changing the world one day at a time. What would you like? Where would you like to be?
2 to 3 years is good. 2 to 3 years, I will have a solid book of business. I will have several employees that I hope that I am treating in a way that helps them go out into their next job and their next role going, this is the base level of support and care that I expect from my next employer, kind of like soothing some of this trauma and momentum that we have of like capitalism and people are disposable. Like I hope that for a few people in my life, I can help soothe some of that and support them, pay them well, and keep being invested in my community, be even more invested in the organizations that I participate in, like PDX Women for Good. I'm on the leadership team of a giving circle. And every quarter, we raise about $10,000 and grant it to a local nonprofit. I want to keep doing that. And I want to give more. So, in 2 to 3 years, I'm actually going to be very similar to what I'm doing now. Hopefully more speaking engagements, maybe another book, but making as much impact and helping others make as much impact is going to be like, I just want to be the Dolly Parton of UX. So whatever that looks like, that's what I'm trying to get to.
I love it. Can I describe you that way when we release
Yes,
this
please. Oh my
episode? I
God.
love it.
If someone else can be the Mary Poppins of UX, I'm the Dolly Parton of UX. It's going to be
Absolutely.
great.
Thank you. I did want to ask Maigen if my listeners would like to find you and see what you're working on, find your book. Where can everyone find you if they'd like to learn more?
I think the easiest place to go is meigenthomas.com. So that has links to everything else that I'm doing, including my mailing list. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to support. Come join my YouTube channel. I do mentorship and motivation. I show accessibility in action. I also kind of rail against some of the crazier thought pieces out there and talk about like, let's bring this down to reality. Very practical, pragmatic kind of perspective, but relentlessly positive.
We need a voice of reason who is also relentlessly positive. We need more of that. So thank you.
I'm not going to be your naysayer. I'm not going to make you feel like, oh, this is terrible. I'm going to help you. If you talk to me, you're going to end up feeling like, man, this is possible. And actually, I think I'm in a really good place to make some impact.
Well, Maigen,
That's important.
it's been lovely. It's been a joy talking with you.
This has been awesome.